Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Chase. Welcome to another episode of the Chase Jarvis Live Show here on Create 11. You guys know the show. This is where I get to sit down with amazing humans and help unpack their brains to help you live your dreams, whether that's in career, in hobby, or in life. My guest today is, as all the guests are, truly amazing. However, this person has changed the future of technology because they are the creator of Ruby on Rails, among other things. Also the founder of Basecamp, a project management software that I have used for years and years and years. My guest is David Heinemeier Hansson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
Super happy to have you. So I've been tracking you and your work and your partner, Jason Fried, with specifically one of the things that was very impactful for me was the book Rework. So you can say a lot of things about your career, technologist, author. How do you identify? Like, to me, self-identification is it's like a weird thing in this world where we're all a bunch of hyphens. So, oh, cool, we're at a party. Well, what do you do? How do you describe yourself?
That's a good question. Usually when I get it, I just say, I run a software company.
Got it.
So that's a short summary, but it really doesn't encapsulate it all, because I think one of the things that's happened is that people have gotten so pigeonholed.
Yeah.
Lots of people it's getting deeper and deeper, especially in technology, right? It used to be a single programmer could create the whole thing.
Yep.
And now that more and more people are getting, I'm a front-end developer doing React with Redux, blah, 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 and then you're down a rabbit hole, right? I like to sort of stay up as a generalist, a generalist in technology.
Cool. And, well, I think we're going to go straight at, actually, let me give one element of context here, which is, I've had a really wide-ranging set of guests on the show. You know, people like billionaire entrepreneurs, esoteric photographers that are just starting but doing something really, really cool and crazy, and a whole spectrum. But I've been, admittedly, I think a little shy on pure technologists. Mm-hmm. And I understand that you don't like the word pure technologist, that you just talked about yourself as a generalist. But conceptually, when you come up with a framework, an entire ecosystem for programming, like, that's a super big deal. It's like developing, it's like a language basically. So I feel this is me, just like I've underrepresented that community, and so like following you for some time and wanting to have you on the show is some redemption. So
sure.
Thank you for being a part of my personal redemption. But also it's absolutely creative in the most in so many ways that are similar to all the other disciplines that have been featured on the show. But I want to know how you think of, we'll just use Ruby for example, but you can talk about it generally, the way that creativity and programming and computers come together.
I think it's really interesting because I think it's really changed. When I came into programming in sort of early 2000s, late 90s, mm-hmm. a lot of programmers did not identify themselves as creatives in my mind. Mm-hmm. They identified themselves as engineers or scientists. Yeah. And I mean, there's some of them who would say that's creative work as well, but it was quite distinct from, say, I'm a writer, or I'm a designer, and they saw sort of a split between these two things, and we're actually quite proud of being like not creatives in that sense, right? And I think that really didn't jive with me at all. It was one of the reasons why I didn't want to become a programmer. I've been a pretty reluctant programmer. I've known programmers, I've been friends with programmers all my life, and it wasn't until basically my late teens, early 20s that I kind of sort of stumbled into it because I needed it. Yeah. And then once I stumbled into it and I needed it and I started using it, I started realizing, I have the wrong conception. This isn't just all about math. Yeah. That was my early conception of programming. This is just, if you like math a lot, you're gonna like programming. Which was because I grew up with demo programmers and game programmers. It was all about vectors and polygons, and like I have no interest, patience, or passion for that. Yeah. And it wasn't until I really discovered information technology, the web in particular, that it ignited something else, and I went like, this is pretty cool. Yeah. And then in particular, once I discovered Ruby. So I had tried a bunch of programming languages that I never really took to, that I was a reluctant programmer of. I never thought of myself as a programmer when I was doing PHP or Java or other things I did in school or just to make things work. Then I found Ruby, and all of a sudden it's like my mind just goes poof. whoa, this is something totally different. I could actually see myself doing this. So all of these things came together right at the same time. We started Basecamp, the software that I'm still doing today, the whole foundation of our business, back in 2003. That was my first real project in Ruby. And that was what gave birth to Ruby on Rails. And all these things came together at sort of the apex, and I just connected all the dots, and it was just like, this is what I want to do. Like up until that point, as I said, very reluctant programmer. I had a lot of other things I liked doing. I liked writing. I had this idea of being in business and so on.
Entrepreneur,
But once it clicked and once Ruby sort of grabbed hold of me, I thought like, wow, okay, I can be a programmer.
Wow. So that was a beautiful, elegant weaving of a lot of things together. So I'm going to try and pick those apart.
Sure.
So let's talk. I think that's a great conceptual framework of how you identify. I want to now. So let's talk about Basecamp, because I'm a passionate Basecamp user, and I think it goes back to a piece in my world where, as sort of creators, I ran my own photo studio, and at the time, the thought of like being organized, it felt like the man keeping me down. Like, these are my ideas, and when you realize, ideas need frameworks to really happen and come to life, whether those are very intricate and detailed or even just general. And Basecamp, the fact that it was online, and the fact that it was easily shareable, and it was simple. Like, to me, it was brutally simple.
Right. And
you guys actively, it was clear to me, were deciding to not go feature crazy. That I loved it. So thank you.
Sure.
I've given you a lot of my money over the years, but I'm very happily so. But B, like, what were some of the guiding principles? A, talk about the founding of the company, but B, like, why, and what was your vision there?
Sure. So before Basecamp, there was 37 Signals. And 37 Signals
It was
started
a blog,
as
right?
It was a blog, too, Signal versus Noise, founded in 1999 along with the company 37 Signals. And 37 Signals started out as a web design company. Jason Fried, my partner, and 3 other designers came together and started making web designs for clients. And I started working with Jason in 2001. We started working on a couple of client projects together. And after we'd worked together for a couple of years, we just came to this one point where I think we dropped something. Like, we were working with some client, and the email got lost, or the files got sent the wrong way, and we're like, this is silly. We're trying to manage this whole project, and there's 4 on our side, and there's I don't know how many on their side, and it's kind of a mess. We're just doing it all in email. There's no process. There's no central place. We can't find anything. We make software. Can't we fix this? And we thought, like, let's give it a shot, right? So we started making essentially just a tool for ourselves. Can we just, we had the inspiration at the time, like, blogs were just taking off. Like, hey, if you had like a project blog, that could be one thing. If we could just have a to-do list here so we know what work needs to be done, if we could just upload some files and put them in this one place, just those 3-4 things, like, that'd be great. So we started doing that, and we put together a package that was well enough for us to start using it ourselves. I mean, I think we spent maybe 3 weeks initially tinkering, and then we started using it. Immediately threw a real project in there, started using it with a client, and it didn't take much more than that to think, like, oh, this is a huge upgrade over email. This is a huge upgrade. Now we have a system, we look better, right? A lot of that was like, you have clients, you want to look good.
Of course,
and you don't look good if you miss the email, and it's just this huge thread, and it's just a mess, right? So it made us look good, and we thought, there's probably others who would like that too. And at the time we were sharing
Are there other people that want to look good?
Is this a market that we can exploit? So the software was kind of cooking, and we were sharing an office with Kudal Partners at the time. Advertisement and these days all sorts of things kind of company, and we showed Jim Kudal, like, what do you think of this? And he was like, can I give you my money? I'm like, okay. Like, we'd pay for this. Like, we were before, again, we were sort of reluctantly building this. We had tried a bunch of different things. We had tried to use blocking system. There was like movable type, and there was this, that, and the other thing. Never really fit. We started building something. It started clicking. We showed it to a couple of people in the industry. They go like, this is awesome. We want to do this. And we go, all right, well, let's try turning it into a product. All the while, we're not dropping anything, right? Like, this isn't like this epiphany that just goes like, oh my God, we have the world's best idea. Let's drop everything else that we're doing and put everything on red. And then hopefully if it works out, this is going to be great. And if it doesn't work out, we're totally bust. So we continue just to have clients. treating Basecamp essentially as a third or fourth client along the way, spent about 6 months building it. And in early 2004, we just had enough to like, all right, let's try to put it out there. And it was kind of a funny launch because we built it for ourselves and it was sort of just barely adequate for that. And we put it out there and we think like, okay, if we can get like, I don't know, make $2,000 a month off this thing after a year, that'd be pretty great, right? $4,000, that was the target. We were like, $4,000 after 1 year, if we can make that a month, that'd be great. Like 2 weeks, we cleared that. And we're like, holy shit, this is crazy, right? And it's so funny because I remember a lot of those numbers.
Yeah.
And if you think of those numbers today in sort of comparisons, they're pathetic,
right?
Like we had no one sign up for this thing essentially, but we had like, I don't know, 150 people sign up the first day and we were like, wow, it's crazy.
Incredible.
Like today you're like, oh man, you didn't have 100,000 people sign up on your opening day? That's a total flop,
It's a bust, right?
So we went through this slow process because there weren't really a lot of other people doing it at the time.
Right.
One of the main things we actually had to convince people was put in your credit card.
Yeah,
it was still a thing.
Right.
In 2004, it was still a thing like, well, I don't know if I want to put in my credit card.
Shopping.
And actually, one of the hardest things when we just got just about to launch was we'd build out this whole system to charge by the year, right? It was going to cost $4.99 a year or something else. $4.99 was the entry plan. And we'd built all the software, get ready for that, right? And then we'd go to the bank. That time, there was no Stripe. There was not a thing you could just sign up. You had to actually go down to the bank and like sign a stack of papers and say, I want to take credit cards. And they, of course, they took like 5 weeks to review this. And we're all busy just about getting ready to launch. I think like the week before launch, they didn't come back to us and say like, I don't know what you're thinking, but this is not going to happen. We are not going to let you charge credit cards and basically charge people for a year in advance. What if you guys go out of business in like 3 weeks? Everyone's going to charge back the amount and we're going to be on the hook.
Yeah, help.
Help, what are we gonna do? Okay, I guess we can just change it and charge it by the month. Is that gonna be okay? And they're like, okay. I guess we'll believe enough in you that you could stay in business for a month. So we changed it over to start charging for the month and charged $49 instead or whatever it was. But that was just, that was the atmosphere, right? Like we didn't really know what was going on. We didn't have anyone to sort of look at. There were none of these frameworks, not just for payment processing, but also the technology, right? Yeah. I had gotten enamored with Ruby, but there wasn't a Rails.
Yeah.
I had to build a bunch of that stuff myself. And if you told me today, like, oh, yeah, you're going to build Ruby on Rails, I'm like, no way. I just built a little thing. I got to get this thing to talk to a database. Oh, how do I do that? Let me look that up. Let me put that together. Oh, then I got to get it to render this thing. Oh, we also got to send email. Oh, I don't know. I got to configure this send mail thing and whatever. So it was a very slow process. There was not a grand vision. We kind of just stumbled into it step by step and without any of the risk, right? So there was none of the risk. There was none of the, oh, we put like all our money on 4 credit cards and whatever, which is a founding myth that I hear a lot. Yeah. And a lot of people are resonating somehow with this heroic ideal that unless you're risking everything and you're basically on the verge of starvation, like it's not really worth it. And we were like, we still had clients. They were paying us money. We were just fine, right?
Yeah, what's wrong with
So there was none of that stuff going on, which also meant, of course, there was no external money. There was no
funding.
Funding. There was none of this stuff because we were paying ourselves just off these clients that we already had. And that's what kind of bootstrapped the business. And then by the time it was bootstrapped, I think it took about a year. And then we were paying ourselves. The company was making just enough money to pay our meager salaries. And we were like, now we can do this full time.
Yeah.
With, again, zero risk, right?
Wow. So embedded in that narrative are so many individual things that I'd like to sort of try and frame. So the summary, I'm going to let you put it into your own words, but you talked at one point about like there's a myth. So talk to me about the myth and then what your experience is relative to that myth. So the myth is
that entrepreneurship requires massive risk, and in many cases also that it requires huge amounts of capital, and that you have to have someone who just is in a position where they can do both of those things, right? They can take a bunch of personal risk, and then they can convince people to give them hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, right? And that was always sort of the archetype of the Silicon Valley style entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And we came out of a completely different atmosphere. First of all, we came out of Chicago, right?
Yeah.
So right there, Chicago, 2004. Do you know how many technology companies were in Chicago in 2000? None of them, right? Right? Motorola, I think, somewhere out in the burbs making Razor phones or something.
Yes.
That was about so it was kind of like a desert in that sense, which it wasn't so much that just that we had issues with the myth, although we did. Both Jason and I had worked in the .com era. Jason had worked for a couple of San Francisco companies. I'd worked in Denmark for a couple of incubators, and we were both deeply, deeply skeptical of that system. It had just bust, right?
Yeah.
2001, the whole thing just exploded, and we just like, this is fake.
Yeah.
This is unsustainable. This is all the things we don't want to do if we get a crack at it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there was just the necessity that, like, even if we wanted to, there wasn't an option. No one was going to give a couple of fellows in Chicago any money to build any kind of system at that time, right?
Yeah.
So we were born both out of sort of a sense of disgust, somewhat, by being exposed to it, and then a sense of necessity.
Yeah.
And then it just kept on rolling. And I kept, as Basecamp was taking off, 2004, 2005, 2006, sort of the industry woke up again. Like there was this lull, and then it woke up again, and all these software companies started happening. And we started seeing sort of the same things that were happening with .com boom and bust. Like people were raising big money, and this whole narrative
Radical
just
growth.
came together that this is how you make software companies. And we're like, hello, no.
We're over here.
We're over here. We're not doing it like this at all.
Yeah.
Right? And in fact, we think the way we're doing it is a lot easier, is a lot more accessible to a lot more people.
Yeah.
And it's more sustainable, and in many ways is more nourishing, is
Healthy,
more
sure,
fun,
yeah,
is
yeah.
more healthy. It's all of these things. And we're like, why is all the attention, why is all the light being shown on this one particular, very narrow path that arguably, yes, has turned out some spectacular successes, right? But you look at what's left for the rest of it, right? There's the 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000 breakouts of the Facebooks, of the Googles, of whatever, and then there's just this mass underneath that just get wasted.
Yeah.
And we looked at that and thought, like, this is such a waste of human potential.
Yeah.
It's not that we shouldn't have those things,
Sure.
it's that there's this whole other segment of the market that should also be there. And if someone wants to start a new business, if they want to be an entrepreneur, especially in software, they should be able to look at at least, they should be able to look at 50 paths, but at least they should have 2 paths. Not just being presented with this one option that says, you have to raise this massive amount of capital, you have to have this crazy burn rate, you have to hire 150 people in 9 months, you have to do this full blast, right? And that was what I ended up being so angry, actually, at. That we had the web.
Yeah.
We had this phenomenal commercial platform that gave so many people so many opportunities. Yeah. And we narrowed the whole thing down to this one archetype of what a software company was going to be. And it was just, it was driving me mad, right? And it was actually driving Jason mad. So we started writing about it, right? We started writing about how did we come up?
Yeah.
Because we didn't do anything special. Like, how many people out there can do a client business where they can get a couple clients, they can pay the bills, and still have a little bit of time left over just so they can pursue their things as a side project?
Yeah.
Lots of people, right?
Yeah.
Versus this tiny group of people who can manage to convince Sand Hill Road VCs to give them money, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, this is just a broader message. We gotta get that going. So that's been sort of a mission and a passion for the past decade plus, to communicate that there's a different way to create not just software businesses, but businesses in general, that kind of goes like, we don't need all this stuff. In fact, in a lot of cases, you're better off without it. If you want to build a wonderful $10 million a year business, like, you cannot do that with that path. You can build a $100 million or $1 billion business with that path. You cannot build a wonderful $10 million business.
Because they don't want
and
to get
there's
behind
so
it.
many businesses that are wonderful $10 million businesses.
Right.
They're wonderful $1 million businesses, right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we have those too? Shouldn't those be part of it? Should we just focus on these
Billion-dollar.
grand slams?
Yeah.
Well, there's some people who make all the money off their grand slams, right? With the VCs. And
Sure.
that whole ecosystem. And they have very loud megaphones, right? And they have very compelling story. This kid, I remember one of the pivotal moments for me where I just got like furious, which is not about the person, Kevin Rose, right?
I
so
know
with
Kevin
Dig.
Rose, yeah.
At the cover of Business Week in, I think, 2016, going like this, how this kid made $60 million in 18 months. And I just said, he didn't make $60 million. Someone gave him a big check to built Dig, which then imploded and never created any economic value whatsoever.
Right.
And I was just like, this is such fucking bullshit.
Yeah, right. It's
right?
So true.
This is bullshit.
Yeah.
And like, how is this just happening? How is this just rolling? How is this just the one narrative that everyone is going like, clap, clap, clap,
Yeah.
oh, this is wonderful?
Yeah.
And it's just like, this is just too goddamn much. So this was sort of that fire that has propelled a lot of what we've been writing about on Signal versus Noise. It's what propelled us to write 3 books already. Getting Real, which was basically an extraction of a series of workshops we did that was called Building a Basecamp, where we were just telling people like, hey, here's how we did it. And not just here's how we did it, like look at what went into it. Do you have those things too? You probably do. Do you have like 10 hours a week, which was what I spent building Basecamp on the technical side, 10 hours a week. Now 10 hours a day, 10 hours a week to build it, you probably do. You can probably squeeze that in if you have clients, if you have other ways of making this happen. And here's how we otherwise went about it. Here's how we went about building an audience. Here's how we went about sort of developing a message. Here's how we went about making software itself. Yeah. So that was Getting Real. That was 2006, I think, and then Rework, 2010. We took basically all those ideas we had from over a decade, mashed them into the book, sold the manuscript to a publisher for the first time. We had self-published Getting Real, signed a contract that said you must deliver a book of 40,000 words, and we had 40,000 words, and we showed up to them like, we're going to cut the book in half. Here's 20,000 words. Publish that instead. It was just sort of, so this whole thing just kept rolling with us, kept screaming about this alternative path, and we still are today. I keep thinking like, there's going to be this tipping point where we don't have to yell so hard anymore, but we're not there yet. So I'm here, I'm everywhere yelling about this alternative way of doing it.
You're yelling at the right people or with the right people, because I think I've also tried to be a champion of the false narrative, of rebelling against that sort of one path false narrative. Whether, for me, it's around education, the fact that if you go to school and you go to these schools and you get a good job, and if you get a good job, then you're gonna be happy. And it's just like that is just don't get us started, right?
Right,
it's
exactly. I'm just about to turn the key.
Right, exactly. Jump backwards off the building. So A, you're in a safe space. B, I'm fascinated with the loud megaphone, and everyone sees the handful of people that are on, whether it's Kevin, bless his heart, love the guy. He's been on the show before. He's an amazing guy.
Wonderful.
But he didn't write the headline.
No, and nor did he do the prop with the earphones and everything, right? Like I've been up for one of those photo shoots. You probably directed some of those photo shoots. Like, hey, what about you put a prop on here? It'll look better. Yeah, just do a thumbs up, and before you know it, you're like this smuck on the cover of a magazine.
Guilty as charged. But I'm fascinated by culture's obsession around a handful of folks that largely are anomalies. And I think it contributes to a terrible amount of anxiety, unnecessary anxiety.
Yes.
That compare a friend of mine, Marie Forleo, the liquor Jägermeister or Goldschlager, which is even worse. Goldschlager is like bad Jägermeister with little flakes of gold in it, so it's like the worst thing. And she calls this compare Schlager because it's terrible for you. It looks ugly and it's terrible, which is you're comparing your real life with everybody else's highlight reel.
Yes.
And so this is now, I think, epidemic proportion in our culture. It's refreshing to hear honest, like heartfelt stories that are radically different. So that, I think, in a way, is shaping Basecamp, right? That's how it came up.
Yep.
There had to be a few other takeaways from Basecamp that, sir, I hear you on that counter narrative, and we're putting a flag in that. What else? Like, what's the peripheral stuff that you learned that was really surprising when you were on that journey?
So with Basecamp in particular, I think, is that generalist sense. So when people ask me, what is Basecamp? Well, Basecamp is sort of a lot of things. Basecamp is a way to help you grow, to cope with things taking off, and all of a sudden you have more things coming on. But what are the actual tools? There's a lot of things in Basecamp, right? Yeah. Because just like how I approach technology from a very generalist sense of like, oh, I want to be able to know a bunch of things about a bunch of things, and I'm not going to go super deep, right?
Yeah.
Basecamp is sort of the same way. Like, it's simple because it stayed up there, right? Yeah. Like, we just built a couple of tools and we put them together and we made the integration, and the integration story was actually in many ways more important than, oh, do we have the best to-do section in the business? No, we don't. There's someone else who just does that, right? Do we have the best messaging system in business? No, we don't. The value is that you put all those things together.
Yeah.
And what I found selling Basecamp and making Basecamp was that there's just the vast majority of people just don't need that much software.
Yeah.
They need a little bit,
Yeah.
right? They're coming from, still today, our number one competitor is email. Number one, when we ask people, where did you come from when you signed up for Basecamp? The majority of them did not use software to help them in their process before at all.
Yeah.
Or they use software in form of email or
Yeah.
stickies or something else like that, right?
Yeah.
So just that that's still true, right? That we're at such a base level. There's such a focus, especially once you get sucked into the web sphere and you start knowing about apps and you start following along. There's such a temptation to all these micro comparisons. Oh, you have this feature, you do that, and whatever.
Yeah.
Most people just, they don't know, they don't care. They just need a little bit.
Yeah.
And our focus on bringing them just that little bit at a reasonable price in a simple way is still controversial. Which is just, it's such an odd thing. I would have thought today, given the fact Basecamp had the success that we would have just a million competitors that were trying to do this integration story. And instead, everything else that's breaking out right now, Slack, for example, the chat, just the chat part, right? Asana, just the to-do list part, right? Like Trello, just the boards and the Kanban style, right? Like Dropbox, just the files, right?
Yeah.
It's all wonderful tools, great tools. And then we talk to customers who's trying to make all those 5 things talk to each other, and they go like, just making that happen is just, can you just give me something that does that?
And you're like,
right?
yeah.
I don't need all of those things. And that integration story is still so open and so right there, right?
It's available.
So that's where we've focused on it, and it continues to surprise me. And the same thing on the technology side. So Ruby on Rails, we created 2003, I started working on it. I released it in 2004. And 2005, 6, 7, it really blew up, right? Like tons of people started using it, and I thought like, okay, this is gonna last a couple of years, and then there's gonna be a Ruby on Rails in every single language and whatever. And whatever an early advantage we have will be gone. And here we are, 14 years later, just pushed out a new release of Ruby on Rails. We've never been more popular, even if there's less buzz. Never more people using Ruby on Rails. Why? Because it's still controversial. Because it's still doing disintegration. Ruby on Rails is just like Basecamp, trying to take a lot of ideas, put them into one package so that a small individual team could go like, all right, let's get on with it, right? Versus most technology today, if you think things taking off, React, Redux, a lot of these things in the JavaScript world are very narrow focused tools that are very good at this one thing. And then it's basically like a box of Legos that just someone empties on the floor and go like, oh yeah, isn't this easy? Just put the whole 4,000 pieces together by yourself. And I'm like, I just want to play with a freaking truck, right? Could someone just put the truck together? Like, do I have to put all 4,000 pieces together myself? I just want a goddamn truck, right? So that's what we're trying to sell, both with Basecamp, with Ruby on Rails. Let's just sell some trucks. Like, everything doesn't have to be a construction kit. Which, let me just, a quick anecdote. When I moved to the US in 2005, I just finished my degree at Copenhagen Business School. I just finished my bachelor's degree. And Jason's was like, this Basecamp thing is going pretty well. This was 2005. We'd been in it for 2 years. I was like, I don't know, maybe I should just do a master's degree since they're free in Denmark. I mean, should I just do that? And I was like, oh, okay, I'll move to the US, right? I arrived in the US, and I think one of the first places Jason took me out to dinner was some burger place. And the food arrives, and it's in pieces. Like, here's the meat. Here's the salad, here's the tomato, here's the onions, here's the bun, and I'm like, where's the chef? Like, no one assembled this burger for me. What am I buying here? I'm I buying ingredients? Like, why didn't we just go to a store? I didn't know of Whole Foods at the time. Like, couldn't we just go to a store and get these things? And this is one of those things that I just find so fascinating. Like, I want finished things. If I go out to eat, I want the chef to prepare the meal for me, and I'll just eat it, right? When I use technology, most of the time, I want it assembled, right? And I think that's still such a controversial idea in a lot of circles, that the assembly shouldn't be part of it. And especially in technology, where it really offends me is that everyone puts their shit together in the same way, which is what offends me about the burger too. Like, how many ways are there to put a burger together? Like, you're gonna put the salad on top of the bun, or like there's not that many stereotypes for it, right? Can't we just agree on a couple of them and then like we just do that, right? So that's what I tried to do with Ruby on Rails. Like, we don't all have to configure how code talks to a database. can we just decide once and then we can move on to something that's more interesting and focus on that?
I love that to me there's so many permutations of the same argument. Like the fact that most of the creators that I know, they're trying to invent an entirely new thing when what you did is you just looked at 4 things out there and they're 4 Legos and you put them together, and that's the remix, and that nothing is new. Like there's so many ideas and we're just trying to reassemble those ideas. People are worried about inventing some new once in a lifetime thing, which keeps so many people from doing shit.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's because there's such a focus on the glory is on this grand insight, right? Like there's something brand new no one has ever heard of before. That's the 1%.
Yeah.
And then there's the 99, which is we just take the pieces that are already there and put them together in a different order, and all of a sudden that order is exactly what a group of people need, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there should be more focus on that, and there should be more validation that not only is that like good and totally okay, it's fucking great.
Yeah.
It's what the vast majority of people in the world should be doing, taking things that already exist and putting them together in interesting, slightly twisted, slightly subtly different ways. And that's how we go. I mean, if you look at both technology and the tools that we're using, like, so Basecamp is what, to-do lists and file uploads and some blocking and some messaging and whatever. There's nothing new in any of them in their archetypes, right? Like Basecamp invented nothing. Ruby on Rails invented nothing, right? All the patterns of use that we took. I went shopping in textbooks and they're like, I want one of those, I want one of those. And then I'm going to put it together nicely and I'm going to give you a truck.
It's so, like, to me, that, again, false narrative that the best ideas are this sort of wild thing that you have to come up with, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime deal.
And you have to be a genius.
Right.
Right? If it's only the 1%, then it's only the geniuses that are allowed.
Yeah.
It's only the geniuses that really have this sort of, they can come up with this brand new thing. Which is what sometimes when I get accolades for the work that I've done, I'm just like, thank you. That's nice. But it wasn't genius.
Right.
Like, it was a bunch of work.
Yeah.
And it was actually also, it's not even that. Because the flip side sometimes of that is like, well, okay, maybe I wasn't a genius, but I outworked everyone. Yeah. This is one of those things I have with Gary sometimes. When like, he's all about like 18 hours a day. And I'm like, no, just like 7 or 8. It's fine. Like 40 hours a week. Like, it's plenty of time to assemble all the trucks the world will ever need for the vast majority of people, right? So, if you think of things like either I have to be a genius or I have to be willing to work 120 hours a week, like clearly a lot of people would look at those things and like, I'm not a genius, I don't want to work 124 hours a week, entrepreneurship is not for me. Which I just go like, that is false.
Yeah.
Right? The same thing with risk. There are all these things that the characteristics we ascribe to these heroes of entrepreneurship, they're the ones that turn everyone else off.
Yeah.
And we need to just take those out. Yeah. We need to actually shoot them down and we need to puncture them and say like, no, you can create great, sustainable, wonderful, impactful businesses on 40 hours a week. You can create great software inventing nothing, right? Just putting things together in novel ways. You can get a business off the ground without mortgaging your house 5 times over, just treating it as a side project until there's some traction and you get going. All of a sudden, if I take those 3 barriers away from you, like, what's left now? Why aren't you doing it? And all of a sudden people can go like, okay. They might still not do it, right? I think sometimes there's also an attraction to those barriers.
Yeah.
Because people can go like, oh yeah, I'd totally be an entrepreneur if it was just because like I was a genius or if I had 120 hours a week or whatever, I'd totally do it, right? But if you take those things away, you don't have those excuses anymore.
Yeah.
And then you might still say like, okay, entrepreneurship is just not for me. I don't want to start anything new. That's kind of risky or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's also plenty of people who were legitimately put off who now go like, okay, I guess I could do it.
Yeah.
I've heard so many times from people who read Rework or Getting Real that it was that permission.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to do it too. And I'm allowed to do it on a sustainable way that I can picture, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people can't picture themselves jumping from like, okay, I work at a job right now, 9 to 5, and I got to jump into this other mode where I'm risking everything. I'm risking my house, I'm risking my kids, whatever. I'm working 120 hours a week and I'm raising money. I can't even picture that jump. It's way too far of a jump.
Yeah.
And there's so many steps not just in between, but steps that you can stop at and say like, all right,
this is a lovely existence. This is a great business. Makes all the money and gives me all the free time.
And that's where I really also just get fired up. Is on these success criteria, right? Yeah. There's such a focus on like, if your success in businesses or in software in particular, it's if you build Facebook or Google or whatever. Yeah. There's just the difference between being an entrepreneur who starts something and like is barely scraping by and getting a business that makes, say, $1 million a year. That is 97% of the difference you will ever experience in material goodness. Yeah. Right? Once you get to the point where you have $1 million clean in the bank, your life is 97% different from having zero and having to worry about every paycheck and so on. Yep. Versus the difference between jumping from $1 million to 10 million, maybe that's another 2%, and then the difference between 10 million and a billion is the last percent. Why would you focus on those things? And why wouldn't you focus your odds on getting to like the 97% of the value? Because the odds are totally different. Yeah. The odds of you setting out to start a business that's going to make $1 million a year, like they're still not great. It's hard. Yeah. But they're infinitely better than the odds of you starting the next Facebook or Google. It is the cultural narrative around that as failure. Yes. Versus raising money as seen as success. Yes. Like raising money basically, and as someone who's done it, right? Like if Mark Cuban sat here, he's like, that's your first big loss. Yes. When you raise a bunch of money. Yes. And now you owe a bunch of people money. Right, and or your blood, sweat, and tears. Yep. Yeah. And I think I really appreciate you helping. That's part of the journey and the vision of this show and Creative Live in general, is that we're helping to rewrite that narrative. So you bringing your passion and your heart into that, couldn't ask for more. So if we stopped recording right now, it would be like a slam dunk. But I do want to get to Rework, because that was something that really, I would say, was more than, I looked at you guys more, I was familiar with 37 Signals and read the blog. As when I carved out a lot of my world was really, really early in that community. Yep. And Rework, though, there was something, like you said earlier, I think permission. Yes. So talk to me a little bit about the concepts behind Rework, give a couple of the overarching themes and why you guys wrote it. So Rework is really a compilation. Surprise, right? Surprise. There's a pattern. It was not a book written from scratch. Yeah. It was a compilation of everything, the best ideas we'd been talking about over the past 10 years. And we put them into this one format. And you know what? The number one, maybe even today, if you go on Amazon.com, the number one critique of the book was, hey, I read Signal versus Noise, every article for 10 years. This has nothing new. Thumbs down. You're like, do you know what? You're the sliverest of the sliverest of the slivers, right? The tiniest percent. Right. Who are these people who followed us for 10 years and read everything that we ever wrote? Right. No one, right? Except that guy, clearly. And I think that's one of these other misconceptions. If you have something to say, you're only allowed to say it once. Then it's not new anymore. You know what? If you want an impact, you better damn well be ready to say the same thing 10,000 times before you even start to scratch the surface, right? Yep. So that's what Rework tried to do, is to say the same things we had been saying for years and years and years in a different format that could reach a wider audience. Or wider, yeah. Yes, and have a different kind of impact. And a lot of the things that we put into Rework was basically just the lessons and the differences that we had took from running Basecamp, the business. One of the things, for example, was ASAP is poison. So we had, at some stage, sort of lulled ourselves in, as most people do, is like, oh, I need this ASAP. I just need this right now, right? There's this constant urgency around, you have to drop everything to do this one thing for me right now, and then in 3 hours, I'll tell you something else that's ASAP, and then you got to drop that to do that for me. And we just found that just such a toxic idea, that ASAP and the constant context switching, that, oh, now you got to do this, now you got to do that, was not a good way to get things done, right? And we always looked at things in the sense of, how can we get things done? We are a tiny team. When Basecamp was founded, we were just 4 people, right? And it took us years and years and years, and then we were 7 people, and years and years and years and years more, and then we were like 14 people. We didn't have a lot of people to spare, so we had to make the hours count. And not thrashing those hours with ASAP, this, that, and the other thing was a big point. The other part that sort of relates to that is that meetings are toxic. That it's so easy, especially for people who are managers, to call creatives into a room and go like, all right, let's have a meeting. Let's brainstorm this out and like, let's spend an hour on this. And usually they place that meeting at like 10:30, right? Someone showed up to work at 9 or whatever. In an hour and a half, I have that meeting. Let me surf Reddit. Am I going to dive into like the hard work of the day, like an hour and a half in advance of when I need to have a long meeting with someone? No, I'm not. So I'm going to waste that time, right? Then we're going to have the meeting, which is not just like a 1 hour meeting, right? Because there's probably 7 people in there. So it's a 7 hour meeting all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Now we spend 7 hours figuring out what we took turns telling each other what we did. We could just have written that down and sent out a goddamn email, right?
Right.
And then on the other side, then like your day's kind of splintered. And this was one of the things that as creators, both Jason and I, we make this stuff.
Yeah.
Like we didn't just hire a bunch of people and then they make the stuff.
Yeah.
Jason made a bunch of the designs. I made all of the code and the programming in the beginning. We didn't have the time to waste.
Yeah.
Right? And then we got on this schedule and realized that if we started bombarding our day and we started splitting it up and like slicing, let's do a meeting at 10:30 and then there's this one guy that wants to meet for coffee at 2, that's the day, it's done. I'm gonna get 0 out of that day, even though I really only have 2 things on my calendar. It's done as a creative day.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to make a huge leap forward in creating a new feature for Basecamp or extracting something into Ruby on Rails or any of these other things. That has to happen on days where I have these long stretches of uninterrupted time. And that was one of the things where people kept coming up to me and like, oh, what's your secret? How do you get to do so much things? How do you get so much done? Is it because you worked all these hours? Is it because you do all these things? No, I just like don't take lunch meetings and I don't meet for coffee and like I have 5 hours of nothing. You know how much stuff you can get done in 5 hours? If no one's interrupting you for 5 hours, you can do the world.
Yeah.
Right? You need no more than 4 to 5 hours out of any given day if you get them in one chunk uninterrupted. And it was lessons like that where we took and said like, people are doing it wrong. They keep staffing up, they keep thinking they need more people when they just need to find out ways to make the hours count. Not the number of hours, it's the quality of those hours. And most people are making do with some really terrible, low quality hours. Yeah. It's not just things like meetings and things that interrupt them, it's also the quality of the hours themselves. Yeah. So as a programmer, as someone who's creative, I need like headspace, focus, dedication on the screen. I have to keep 1,000 concepts in my mind to put it all together, right? If I'm sitting right next to the sales guy who's yelling on the phone, what's the quality of that? It is shit.
Yeah.
And I've worked at places like this, and there's especially this thing, and I find it so hilarious, like, oh, we're gonna have a modern office, we're gonna have this open office, and we're gonna sit at a long desk, and like, this is all gonna be great, and we're gonna mix people, like salespeople, and programmers, and designers, and they're all gonna collaborate all the time, and all the programmers just went like, give me the gun now, right? This is not progress, this is not modern, this is not better, this is just shit. And the reason it's shit is because it's designed by people who are not actually creatives doing the work.
Yeah, so true.
And it's things like this were just like, this is so unnecessary. Like you talk to any programmer, or designer, or writer, anyone who needs this
dedicated
focused, creative time to get done. This is where happiness lies, right? For me, if I get, which is rarer these days than it used to be, and I'm regretting that, I'm trying to find ways to get back to it, getting those 5 hours where I can just dive deep into a problem, that is the day where I'll sit with the rest of the day just like, right? You get into that flow state, you get all the dopamine rush of creating something good, and it's a wonderful day. Compare that to a day, as we talked about, the one that had been punctured 5 different ways, where you're sitting next to the salesperson. That's a day where you go home at the end of the day thinking, what did I get done today? Yeah. That's a shitty day. Shitty days like that make you feel shitty. Like, why would we want to make people feel shitty and get less interesting work done, right? Yeah. So it was just these things like, on their face, there is no upside to this shit, except for maybe the aesthetics of the workplace. I worked at a place like that once, right? And we had, this was in Copenhagen, an investor was gonna come by. And like, we all had to get arranged up at our little desks. And like, we got turned around so that some of us had to sit like facing the hallway with our backs to it so everyone could see the screen. So, oh, aren't they busy? Like, aren't these monkeys really typing in there? You should really invest in this thing. They're typing. Oh, they're so busy. And I was just like, this is such shit. When I'm gonna make my own goddamn company, we're not gonna do this monkey business. And that was a lot of it, right? Yeah. Like that's a lot of what Rework was both Jason and I, we got this dose of shitty company running when we worked for other people, and we were like, if I get the chance to call the shot, we're not gonna be this stupid. We're gonna go back to first principles, and we're gonna build our way up, and we're gonna find all the shit that doesn't make sense, and we're not gonna do it.
What are some other things that don't make sense that you don't do?
Well, for me, I don't work in an office. So remote working is just huge for me. It's like the most natural way to get a lot of these properties we just talked about. No one can pull me into a meeting when I'm like 4,000 miles away from Chicago in Malibu or in Spain or other places where I've lived, right? Even better, the times over the past 6-7 years, I've lived about part-time in Spain. We got started on the whole business, by the way, the origin story there. I was in Copenhagen, Denmark. I wrote Jason an email, and we got started working together. And I was 7 time zones off, right? So we did the bulk of the formative work on Basecamp 7 time zones apart.
Wow.
And initially we thought, oh man, that's such a handicap. If we were just sitting next to each other all the time, that would be great. Then I moved to Chicago, I started coming to the office, and we started getting like half the work done, and we're like, what the fuck? So I started working from home very early on and just realizing this is the environment for me. When I can control my own environment and I can just like not respond to people and ignore people, right? It's just a huge advantage. So remote work for us has just been huge.
Yeah.
Not just for me and Jason and the other people who are already at the company, but what it allowed us to do. We've hired people from all over the US, from Canada, from Europe, just wonderful, great people who live in not tech hubs. Right now, we have no one who lives in New York and no one who lives in San Francisco. Not because there aren't good people there, but because there's wonderful people everywhere else too.
Yeah.
And they're completely overlooked.
Yeah.
And they're a completely untapped market of just intense talent of people who don't want to move to any of those cities, right? And right now, there's such a focus on like, oh, well, we all got to get everyone to the office. And we're like, rework or remote is such an easy win. You just decide that this is what you do, and now you have access to world-beating talent. Wow, of course we're going to do this. We wrote a whole book about that too called Remote Office Not Required, where we kind of just tried to put all these thoughts into like, this is how you should do it. Because a lot of these cases with both rework and with remote, the way we actually get the inspiration with it is when I start talking to other people, and then I listen to like how their business runs, and I just go like, what? Are you fucking kidding me? This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I had the same thing with remote, right? Yeah. Remote got kicked off after I had, I don't know how this happened, but I had talked to 3 CEOs from 3 companies, and we were talking about remote work, right? And they were giving me the reasons for why they weren't doing remote work. And I just had this reel running in my head. Oh my God, you're so stupid. Like, you really have not thought this through in just an iota of it. Like, someone should really help you think this through, right? Because your arguments are so shallow. Yeah. Your defenses of why we all need to sit at the same table are so idiotic. And I know you're not that dumb. Yeah. Right? I know you're just misinformed and underinformed. Yep. Someone should inform you about this shit.
What about, let's talk about, I think, right. I'm going to throw a rock at this because I think I know the answer, but there are some people for whom the social aspect is part of their personality and for whom connecting it feeds a part of their soul. Do you think that, like, people getting together physically, that there is some upside? Do you feel like it could be a myth? Like, how do you think about it or is that just because the world used to be much more extroverted and now there's room for both introverts and extroverts that we're seeing these blended models? Like, why? Do you think?
That's good. And I'm putting things that have been on the edge.
Of course, we're doing that on purpose. And otherwise it's a boring conversation.
This is good because it isn't that cut and dry. And even though we embrace remote work intensely at the company, I have seen the formation, we still meet up. The entire company flies to Chicago twice a year for a week where all we're doing is basically connecting directly with people in person because it has a huge value. And we've had lots of cases of that where someone ends up in a situation. If all you do is you work for a remote company, you sit at home and your breakfast blends into your dinner, that's misery. Like, you're not going to be a happy, wholesome human being after just 3 weeks of that, right? Humans are not built for that. Humans are built for different amounts of social interaction and with different people, and it doesn't have to come in this package that the office used to provide us, right? So for me, I'm definitely an introvert. And most of the people who work at Basecamp probably is. A lot of creatives, I think, tend to be. If you look at programmers, writers, designers, whatever, a lot of them are introverts, not all of them. For sure. But they've been ignored for so long. Right? Everything has been driven by like what the management, sales, all these other roles that are traditionally much more likely to be extroverted wanted. And they wanted, oh yeah, we should have this thing, and like, wouldn't it be great if we could be there all day and we put into foosball tables and we can brainstorm at like 11 at night if that's what I want. And all these introverts just quietly had to take it. And I think remote as an idea is kind of like starting to flip tables around, right?
Yeah.
But even with that said, we have plenty of people at Basecamp who like don't want to sit at home all day, so they go work somewhere else. Like there's co-working spots. There's plenty of those.
Go to Rework or
Yep. Plenty of people go to coffee shops. They go somewhere else to mix it up, but it's on their schedule, and they can sort of mix and match. They could choose to say, all right, the 4 hours where I really need the dedicated work, I'm just going to lock myself into my home office and do that, and then I'm going to go to a coffee shop in the afternoon and get sort of the vibe and whatever. Those things are hugely important, and it shouldn't be seen as it's either or. The best setup of that is some sort of mix.
Yeah. So Ruby on Rails. Let's go it's a big deal, okay? Let's just acknowledge it. That's badass. How do you think about it today? What role, how do you touch it? What role does it play in your life? How do you think about it? Where is it going? Tell me a little bit of a story, create a narrative around what that technology platform or way of thinking is.
Sure.
What's it about now?
So I released Ruby on Rails in 2004 when I had just extracted it, pulled it out of Basecamp essentially, right?
Yeah.
And it got sent into the world as a sense of gratitude. So when we build Basecamp, I build Basecamp on all these open source tools. MySQL, Apache, all these long-running projects that have been around for quite a long time, and I got them all for free. And the fact that I could get all those things for free, Ruby itself is open source as well, the language. I got all those things for free were one of those barriers that were taken away. If you were trying to make a website in '95, you had to buy a license from Oracle, and you had to buy a license from this and a license from that, which meant that these barriers of entry were really high.
Yeah.
When we started building Basecamp, there were none of those. I paid $0 for any of the software that sort of went into creating the application itself. And that was why we could do it. We couldn't have done it otherwise.
Yeah.
So I just felt an immense gratitude that I had to get back when I had something of value that I could share with others.
Yeah.
So that was the first instinct, that I don't know if anyone's going to like it. I like this thing I built. It allowed me to use Ruby, this wonderful programming language that really opened my mind and that allowed me to self-identify as a programmer. And this helped me do it. So here's Rails. And I hope that it does the same to you. And thankfully it did, right? So a lot of people then picked it up and got inspired about it and started using it. And as I said, that's 14 years ago. And in the interim years, I've just kept on doing it. Because it was never about a destination. It was about a creative outlet for me where I can take everything as I'm working on a piece of code and extract the common things so that I don't have to do it again. One of the things I absolutely hate is repeating myself, right?
Yeah.
I've written chapters for books where the computer crashed and I lost the whole thing, and I was just, that chapter's not happening.
It's not in the book.
I'm not writing it again. I'm sorry, done, right? I cannot stand repeating myself, which is also one of the reasons I'm a really bad conference speaker, because I cannot deliver the same talk twice.
Right.
I can do it one time, so I have to put all this energy into it, and then I do it one time and that's it. I cannot repeat myself.
Record it and share it, yeah.
Yes, exactly, which is one of the wonderful things after YouTube, that at least you could then share it in mass. It wasn't just you did it for the 50 people or 100 people who showed up. But I feel the same thing about technology. I hate repeating myself. I don't want to do the same things again. I want to solve new problems.
Yeah.
If I keep solving the same problem I've been solving over and over, I'll get bored and I'll disconnect. So the way that my sparks fire is that I get to solve new problems. And the only way I get to solve new problems is if I encode the solutions to all the old problems into a box, and then I can just take that box next time I need that, right?
Yeah.
And I can share that box with other people, and they can share their solutions with me, and then I end up just creating new stuff, which is really the fun part. All right, not necessarily creating new stuff, but putting it together in new ways.
Yeah.
And not having to redo the same stuff over and over again. So there's that whole aspect to it, and then it's just the aspect of it allows me to program Ruby, and that's just fun.
Yeah.
Right? I like programming Ruby more when I'm creating something real, and that's usually the impetus to it. But I also just like doing it itself. Right?
Yeah.
Like photography, obviously. I got into photography, and it's just fun to do it. It's also great to get a great picture of it, but there's just something in the process itself, the flow that it provides you as a creative person, that's inherently rewarding. So that's why with Ruby on Rails, I just keep on doing it as long as it's fun, as long as I get this energy out of it. And then, of course, you also get this sense of belonging, this sense of meaning.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of thousands of programmers who've used or are using Ruby on Rails, all these wonderful applications that's been birthed from it that I get to look at and say, like, oh, I played a small part in that. And I can get to continue to play a small part in that. And I can continue to get programmers to focus on programming as creative endeavor, not just as scientists, not just as engineers, but that there's this whole expression of yourself and your writing into this. This is one of the terms I'm really fond of, is to be a software writer. It's not, we don't have software engineers at Basecamp. We have a lot of software writers. And
emphasis on writing.
Getting that emphasis on writing and getting to do it. It's just fun. I also like actual writing, right? Like I cannot not do that. Like if I take, we were talking about people at Basecamp about this reasoning, doing your favorite things. One of the reasons, we just recently decided that we're freezing all hiring at Basecamp. We're 54 people. The business for 2007 was the best year it's ever been.
2007 or 17?
17, sorry.
Okay, yep.
2017, best year it's ever been for the business, and we're not gonna hire anymore. Which is, what? Most people go like, oh, you do a hiring freeze because like things are a little tough or a little tight and you gotta cut back. Things are the best they've ever been. We're hiring freezing, and we're hiring freezing in large parts because I want to do my favorite things. Do you know what my favorite things are not? They're not doing whatever legal review of things you have to do when you have 54 people. And like, I can just already see all the shit that I have to do to help run a company of 54. Is like, that slice of my life is big enough. If I make it any bigger, I'm gonna puke, and then I'm gonna quit. I don't want to puke and I don't want to quit. So this is it. We can have 54 people, that's what we can manage. And then I get to do my favorite things. I get to write, I get to program, and I want to do more of that, right? And I want to stay in that state forever. People keep asking me, oh, what's next? What's the next big thing you're going to do? What do you mean? I want to keep writing, I want to keep programming. That's good enough. I can do 50 years? Yeah, sounds good.
Sign me up.
Exactly.
So I think this is beautiful and it's elegant. But doesn't it? And I'm, for what it's worth, I agree. I'm capitulating right now. I think when I have at different times in my life through the expectations of others, it's very hard to stake out this claim, which is one of the reasons I love how strongly you're presenting this. And I feel like I've done the same thing. I had to, bailed on professional soccer and dropped out of school a couple, to do the thing. And I felt like that was hard. But once you've done that a couple times, you're like, wow, I'm actually the boss. I'm the boss of me. I'm in charge. I don't have to do the shit. If I don't want to do the shit, I got to do the thing. And I might have to carve out my own path. But I'm the author of my life and no one else is. And so it's very courageous. But what about all of the success? Of course, I'm speaking tongue in cheek here, but what about all the success that you're walking away from? By having Ruby on Rails be even bigger, to have Basecamp instead of 10 million in revenue. What about 100 million?
And we get this all the time. And I get this accusation that like I'm not ambitious enough. I'm like, first of all, really? Like, usually I feel slightly embarrassed of like iterating through the things that I've done over the last 15 years because it sounds like, oh, there's
created Ruby on Rails and wrote a couple best-selling books. And
but right. So like, first of all, I'm well past good enough and done enough. Like, I don't owe the world anything more than what I've put into it right now. What I do owe myself is that I have complete freedom to do what I want to do. If I wanted tomorrow to walk away from Basecamp, I could not work for the rest of my life and I'd be totally fine, right? Like, when you have that freedom, when you reach that point, you get to this sort of mirror where you look at yourself like, why am I doing this? Like, what is the meaning behind it? And what I found is the meaning behind it is not adding another zero to my bank account. Like, I've kind of stopped counting. At one point, I totally did count, right?
Because you needed to.
I needed to, and it was also just this tension. Like, I didn't come from money, and you get exposed to this thing, and your brain kind of goes a little haywire. And I think humans are wired for that, right? Like this accumulation, and then all of a sudden you accumulate, and you're like, shit, my life isn't any better than it was 5 years ago. I've accumulated all this extra stuff. What is it that I actually want out of life? And when I look for those sort of pillars of meaning, they are things like, I want to continue to spend most of my time doing my favorite things, like programming and whatever. I want to have the impact in the form that I want to have the impact. I don't want to be forced into some constraints where I'm going to sort of bend, right? A lot of people, I think, go into business and ideas with the best of intentions. And then once the pressure starts squeezing, they're human.
Yeah.
And they crack and they break in all sorts of ways where I think I'm no different. If you took me and you inserted me under the standard pressure cooker of a high-flung VC-backed startup company, my ethics might start to squeak, right? Here I am, though, have none of those pressures, right? I feel like I have an obligation to myself and the world to like, okay, like let me then live the very best life, the closest to the ethics that I can get, closest to the best use of the time that I can get, and then what more is there? Isn't that already perfection? Isn't that the arrival point? Right? What else is am I going to get to? Is it like if you can afford the jet, that's when everything starts getting magic? No, come on, seriously, right? Like as we talked about, there are these thresholds and there are these barriers when you're worrying about like paying the bills and whether the water's going to get shut off. Like money is a very large part of what's going on, right?
Yeah, of course.
Then you reach these points which we reached like 10 years ago when like, okay, I have $1 million in the bank. I have none of these concerns. Right? Maybe if I just stopped working and didn't work for 20 years, I might have some of these concerns, but they're erased. So whatever else I can accumulate really is not going to add so much to it. I'm at 97, right? I love the 80-20 principle, right? If I can put in 20% and I can get 80 back, that's the stuff that I want to do, right? Like I don't want to keep squeezing and squeezing and squeezing to get the last 2% out of the citrus, right? It's sour. And that's a contentment. And that's still hard because everything in our culture, especially in the entrepreneurial work, is all about like serial entrepreneurs, doing the next thing, building a bigger thing, growing, right? To reach the point where you can say, enough. I have everything that I need. I'm at a good place. I want to stay there. It's really hard. And this is one of the things where I've been so happy to discover Stoicism. Tim Ferriss and plenty of others have been, Ryan been really pushing it. And I think it's a really healthy antidote to all these other pressures that we have in life. That we have these Roman emperors and whoever else from 2,000 years ago telling us like, hey, you know what? Even though I have everything, like including the whole Roman Empire, I am still susceptible to all of these pressures and uncertainties and whatever. And I need to step back and get to a better place where I'm at ease and I'm at rest with the world. So that has been part of sort of my focus over the last 5 years is to realize what I have and not fuck it up. I think the easiest thing you can do when you have something good is to fuck it up by keep striving for more and more and more.
It's beautiful. I want to understand the psychology behind that. What do you have to do to, clearly you have to actively deprogram.
Yes.
So let's get tactical for a second. Do you shape every day? Do you have a set of values that you write on the mirror in the morning? Do you have, is it like the meditation on the thing of staying status quo? Like what are some of your tools? You mentioned Stoicism. Presumably there's a half a dozen others because again, I feel like I've lived that in a lot of different ways and it resonates so deeply. And frankly, not a lot of people out here in the world talking in the same way that you're talking right now. So the people that have tapped into that, and I'm sure there's, a lot of people who are watching and listening that are like, oh shit, this is my unlock. So let's shift gears for a second and try and get really tactical. And what are some of the key things that you've done that have helped you? Presumably you got some shit in your childhood that's really good. You had parents that did X or Y, but maybe not. So what's the thing? What is a set of things that have helped you, A, get to, and then B, maintain this point of view?
Love that. Because one of the reasons I resonated so dearly with Stoicism was I felt like I had like a crutchy version of it running my own personal operating system already. That I already had a bunch of the tactics that Stoicism preaches built in. And one of the key ones is negative visualization. This idea that loss is going to happen and you better start preparing for it now. Just that if it does, and when it does, because it will, you won't get destroyed. So negative visualization is something I practice every day. I practice thinking some calamity is going to happen. Basecamp is going to blow up, we get hacked and plundered or whatever, and the whole thing is going to fall apart, right? What's left? Have I invested everything that I have? Have I invested my entire ego into that such that if it goes away, poof, then I'm no one? If I have, or if I'm too heavily invested in it, I need to pull back. I need to have other things in my life. I can't just be all in on this one thing. If you're all in on one thing and that thing goes away, you're all out, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing left. So that's not a good strategy in life, in finance, in anywhere. Like you go to any stockbroker and like, oh yeah, I'd like to put everything into this one growth stock. They go like, wait, you crazy? You got to diversify, right? Yeah. So I think about like ways I can diversify my ego, my sense of self-worth, and all the things that my interests, right? Yeah. Such that if this one pillar crashes down, I'm still here, and I'll still be totally fine. And I think about it then even within the categories of things that I do like, especially around coping with success and wealth. Like I know a lot of people who've made it very well, who've narrowed their comfort zone down to like a very thin slice because their expectations about what life now owes them now that they're rich or whatever are extremely high.
Yeah.
And they put it on themselves like, oh, I've been first class. I mean, what the fuck? I haven't even got my champagne yet. This is outrageous, right? And you just go like,
dude, you're flying through the air at 600 miles an hour.
In a fucking seat that reclines and you can sleep? Have you seen the people traveling with 3 kids back in coach? Like, that's fucking hard. Stop goddamn complaining. And I think most people, like, it's not that person is a bad person. This is the natural outcome.
Yeah.
This is autopilot. When you just run, like, once you get to, like, you acclimate, right? Yeah. And then you become an asshole. Once you acclimate to that level, like, you reach the level of asshole, right? You're like, all right, now I wasn't an asshole, now I'm an asshole. And to push back against that, you constantly have to think like, you know what? I could be back in coach and that'd still be fucking wonderful. We'd still be flying through the air. I'd still be going some amazing place that like
on the internet at 600 miles an hour.
Like, how is this not wonderful, right? So you have to constantly go back and think through those things and try to resist and broaden your comfort zone. Yeah. That the natural sense is that it's going to shrink and you have to constantly widen it out, right? So I tried to do that through all sorts of things, and I tried to put into perspective what are the things that I actually like and enjoy. So if everything went to shit tomorrow, right, and we lost everything and we went bankrupt and whatever, if I still had my hands and my eyes, I could still program. Hey, wait a minute, programming is one of my favorite things in the world. So I lost everything, but I still had my favorite thing in the world. It's probably not that bad, right? Life is probably still pretty good. And once you get to that point, I think you remove a lot of the anxiety. So I know a lot of people who've made it really well who have a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
Because they're so afraid of losing the things that they've accumulated. But if you stop looking at the things you've accumulated and you look at yourself, did I grow as a person? Like, how is anyone going to take anything away from that, right? Like, if I get wiser, if I get better, if I get smarter, if I get kinder, how am I going to lose these things just because something happens in the market or something outside of me, out of my control, takes my material things away? I'm not, right? And it gives a sense of peace. Yeah. Like, I'm at peace now with the fact that Basecamp could end tomorrow. There's no indications it's going to. It's, as we just talked about, best ever, blah, 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 right? Things are great. But I've been at times in my life where I thought like, oh shit, what if this thing stops, right? Yeah. And you just get such a sense of ease and sense of comfort once you let go of that. So negative visualization to realize, to expand your comfort zones and your range and the acceptable outcomes, right? Which gets me to sort of the second point of this, which is amor fati, loving your faith. Not trying to change anything. Like, people always talk to me in interviews like, what's the one thing you would tell yourself like 5 years from now that you want to do different? Or I would tell myself nothing. The fact that it's been a journey like this where we've made mistakes, that's what makes it worth it. I think back of when I used to play video games a lot, right? You'd have cheat codes, right? You could look up at the back of a magazine and you could look at, I get it, infinite lives. As soon as you got infinite lives, the game was uninteresting. Yeah. I haven't even read this book, but I just like the title, the path is the struggle, or the struggle is the path, or something. This idea that we're built for striving. Yes, the obstacle is the way. That's what it is. I haven't read the book, I just love the title, right? Yeah. And it resonates with me in just that sense that like, it is meant to be somewhat of a struggle. Yeah. Not a deeply uncomfortable struggle in all the ways, but a struggle somewhat. And once it stops being a struggle, once there's stopped being meaning to it, the whole thing falls apart. Which is also the whole reason why like, people go like, oh, what if you could sell your company tomorrow? Like, Google came by and they were buy it for $1 billion or something. Would you do it? Like, no. Then what am I going to do? Like, I can already sit on a beach and drink a mojito for 3 months if that's what I want to do. Like, then I would do it for 9 months? No. Do you know any entrepreneur who sold their company and then like just retired to the beach and leaned back and like for the next 10 years just sat there and sipping mojitos? They'd be dead, right? It's just that's not what humans are built for. They're built for doing things. They're built for having a purpose and having a meaning. And those things come from such different things than we tend to think they come from. So there's a lot of focus on that. And I think about that a lot and trying to line these tactics up and these perspectives, like more fatty, like negative visualization, like expanding your comfort zone, like constantly having like self-criticism running as a dialogue for not becoming that asshole.
What about specific tactics? To me, those are ideals. Like, what are the actual things that you do? Do you carve out 20 minutes a day? Do you write? Do you have a journal? Let's get tactical for a second.
Sure. So one thing I do, a way I think through all of this is through writing. Mm-hmm. So I write quite a lot. We have a blog, Signal versus Noise, that we've been running since '99.
Yep.
It's the continuation of the same thing. It's where we extract the books from. And it's how I think through and how I process a lot of these things. So whenever I have something that I'm wrestling with, I always try to, can I write it out? Can I get something out of it? Because it's not just about, oh, this is an interesting piece of writing. Yep. It's also like a way for me to think. And writing as a way to think and a way to get clarity is just such a powerful tool. So I have maybe, 50 blog posts that I haven't published that are in my notes on my iPhone. I tend to write actually a lot on planes, and I'm just writing on my iPhone in the Notes app. And it's such a calming way to sort of get these things out of my system. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of that, like this idea, even though I'm not a big fan of these productivity hacks, but the idea of getting things done, for example, right? It's a framework for getting things out of your mind so you don't have to keep fussing about them, keep stressing about it. And I have the same thing with these tensions. When I have anxieties, when I have discomforts and so on, you can get them out of your body by like typing them out, right? Like it's almost like extracting them out. And you're like bloodletting, right?
Yeah. A couple leeches on your
totally
skin.
Not a thing. You shouldn't let your blood in whatever. But I do that with writing. That's a key tactic. And the other thing I do is I keep thinking I have enough time. So when I'm really engaged in a project or whatever, I have a natural temptation to being just obsessive about it, right? Like, oh, well, let's just keep going. Like, oh, it's 6 o'clock, let's just keep going. Oh, it's 8 o'clock, let's just keep going. And a lot of people celebrate that, and I don't. Like, I actually get to that and like, oh, it's 5 o'clock, I've been at my desk for 8 hours. Do you know what? The kids are next door, I should just go play with them. And I think like, I have this good flow going, and that's wonderful, but I'll also be there tomorrow. And like, I'm going to do this for, what did we talk about, the next 50 years? Whether I put another hour in now or tomorrow probably doesn't matter that much, right? So this notion of constraints. I love constraints. I love constraints. As I said, we freezed hiring at Basecamp with 54 people because that's a way to set constraints. Yeah. It sets constraints about our ambition, our vision. These are the things we can do, and we can't do everything, and that's great. The worst things I have is like when I have this blank canvas, right? When you can do anything you want, it's incredibly intimidating. I want like a space. Like I can draw within these lines in here. I have 8 hours today to do something. Let's get to it, right? Not I have unlimited hours. Not I could work 22 hours if I could somehow get myself into it, right? There's no constraints there. I can just be flappy and inefficient. Yeah. If I say to myself, I just have the 8 hours, I can just do that, then that's what I got. Let's go.
So, this is an extraordinary, I feel like, reframing of so many cultural memes or ideas or constructs, and in a very sort of authentic way. That's, to me, unlocking the ability to go against the grain. Like the meta narrative here is one of the things that I'm most excited about. We've covered, and we've covered a lot of ground. But like to try and synthesize all that, are these key operating principles for you, and do you think about them, and are there 3 of them or 5 of them? Or, of course, we've been talking about it all along, but when you think about it, like it's the ability to go against the grain.
Yes.
The ability when everyone, I think about this as a founder and CEO of a company that has a bunch of really smart people on the board and really smart people that are, in the executive team and at every level of the company there's always competing ideas.
Yes.
And it's your sort of willingness to say no under a lot of pressure.
Right.
Your willingness to stick to your own internal values,
yes.
either as a leader or as an independent thinker.
Yes.
To me, that's the meta narrative what we've been talking about. So I think as a sort of a bow on this, is there something that you've done to cultivate the ability to go against the grain? Because that is massively useful. What have you done?
I think one of the tactics that I've picked up is this notion: if I'm saying something where everyone is nodding, I'm not saying anything. Like then we're all agreeing, right? Like which means that most of the time, and I'm not saying just you and me.
Sure.
I'm saying like the world at large as a sounding board for ideas. If I send something out and like it just comes back 100% positive,
Yeah.
probably wasn't that. It was probably trite. It was probably banal.
Yeah.
Right? When I send something out, I want to get at least some part back that go like, you're a fucking idiot.
You're crazy.
Right? You're crazy.
Yeah.
This is stupid. It's never going to work. It's dumb. It's like, this is not how you build a successful company. You're unambitious. You're all these things. Like, I've actually trained myself to be a little addictive to that, like vinegar. Right? That when I send that out and I get some of that vinegar back, I'm like, there might be something here.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean just because people call you stupid that you're not also actually stupid.
Yeah.
But it just means that like there's got to be a mix of that, right? Kathy Sierra, who's one of my all-time favorite writers and idols, she's not writing a lot online anymore, but in the mid-2000s, she had this blog called Creating Passionate Users. And she had this notion of you can be bland, you can be in the middle, you can be sort of just whatever, and no one cares, right? Or you can have people who absolutely love what you do. But if you have people who absolutely love what you do, in order for the universe to balance, there has to be an almost equal-sized group of people who absolutely hate what you do.
Yeah.
So you have to embrace the fact that there's going to be these two poles. You cannot have people who love what you do without also having people who hate what you do, right? So these are one of these ideas that I have on like, am I doing something meaningful and worthwhile? Do I have both poles? If I just have one of the things, I'm banal and trite and whatever. If I have the other pole, there might be something here, right? So that's one of the ideas. The other thing is to cultivate a sense of intrinsic self-worth, that I shall evaluate the quality of my work. And even though I have these two poles and they provide some feedback, right?
Yep.
The main feedback comes from the fact, am I happy with what I've done? And I think it's hard to maintain that in this world of likes and hearts and whatever, because it erodes your own sense of self-criticism.
Yeah.
Because you have this instant reaction from the crowd, like, oh, we liked it or we didn't like it, right? And you can grow addicted and you can grow weak very quickly from that. So I try to really keep an arm's length distance to that. And then I keep thinking about passages in works that I have that are ridiculous that people liked and go like, yeah, that was stupid. So Rework, for example, we have, I think there's like 5 phrases that are the most quoted phrases, right? One of those phrases is, watch the waves, see where they break, adjust accordingly. I'm like, that's so stupid. That is so stupid. And like, it's one of the, like, a lot of people reacted like, oh yeah, wow, that sounds like it has something, and to me it has nothing, right? It's such a empty calorie poster with like the wave and like where we can all be like, oh, that's hanging in the waiting room in a doctor's office, right? And like, and I wrote that. I mean, that's just dumb. So that's a good grounding effect, just to look back at your own idiocy, to just go like something. Yeah, I
have a good laugh.
Exactly, have a good laugh at it, right?
I'm so grateful for you coming on the show. This has been an absolute treat. I'm already reading the show notes in my mind. Thank you for being wildly, radically unconventional and for helping the rest of us think that way.
Thanks for
It's
having
been
me.
a huge treat, David. Thanks, bud.
Cool.
All right, signing off until probably tomorrow.